Okay, a very good morning to every one of us. I want to believe you can hear me and also that you can see my screen clearly. Um, it's good to be with you all once again. Please, if I'm not audible enough, admin kindly indicate. All right, I believe everything is clear and we can hear me clearly and see my screen. My name is Engineer Emmanuel Hussein Diale, and I want to hope or trust that you all have been safe wherever you are. Um, I would encourage us to please pay rapt attention to today's classes and ensure we take every bit of the information we'll be receiving or we'll be getting from here. It's very important, okay? So we'll try as much as possible to be as fast as we can so we can um, cover what is left of this course. All right. So today we'll be starting up with the monitoring aspect. Remember, we said there are 4 areas that we're looking at apart from the foundation. We talked about what the plan, do, check, and what act. All right. So in our previous classes, we have been able to touch on the plan and do aspect as well as the foundation. I would encourage us to try as much as possible to read up some of those parts or those areas that we have touched before, and even the ones we've not really gone so detailed into. Okay, there are areas that you can just go through and you grasp immediately, not complicated at all. All right, I will give you some other assignments also to go practice, and I believe they will help us to develop ourselves as far as this course is concerned. All right. So today we'll be talking about what now? Monitoring. When we're looking at monitoring, what are we looking at? We said this is the check, the side, the part that the aspect that it's got to do with what now? Check, which is what? Evaluation stage. All right. Now there are two types, two forms of monitoring. Your monitoring can either be what now? It can either be active monitoring or reactive what? Monitoring. We call it active or proactive monitoring or what? Reactive monitoring. What do we mean when we talk about what now? Active monitoring. In active monitoring, we're looking at the kind of monitoring that plans to put or they are involved the plans we put in place before occurrences occur. All right. Now it's got to do with determining or assessing the effectiveness of the HSC or the health and safety procedures. Okay, that's for active monitoring. But the reactive monitoring, the kind of monitoring that we do um, after an accident has occurred. Yeah. So generally, we look at monitoring from two sides. We say uh, one, the aspect that got to do with what now to determine or assess the effectiveness rather of health and safety procedures, and then we also look at it from the aspect that it also helps to make what now recommendations for improvement. So those are two areas that monitoring helps us to achieve. All right. So the performance in monitoring performance is an essential step of managing any aspect of business to identify what it will help you identify the strengths and weaknesses and progress that you are making against the what now the objectives. You have your objectives and you need to be making progress in that Okay, sorry about that. Network was really too quick. All right. I believe you can hear me clearly now, or better now. All right. So when we look at active monitoring, we want to consider the areas or the types or the ways by which we can carry out what now? Active monitoring. How can we carry out active monitoring? First of all, we look at it from the aspect of what? Inspection, safety inspection. All right. These are different ways for active monitoring. For active monitoring, you know, we talk about what now? Safety inspection. We talk about survey. We talk about tours, safety tours. We talk about safety sampling. We also look at auditing and medical or health surveillance, you know, medical and health surveillance, and we also look at benchmarking. All right. When we say inspection, what we are looking at is what now? To identify the hazards that first, okay, we identify the hazards and then implement the necessary mitigating measures or control measures that we're going to put in place. So that's inspection. Okay, for proactive monitoring, you're trying to ensure that you're trying to put some measures in place to prevent the occurrence of an accident. All right. Much later, or when you go higher in your safety, in your field of safety, you come across a term that we call the Swiss cheese model. The Swiss cheese model, this is just a little digression. The Swiss cheese model talks about the tendency for the the possibility or the propensity for an accident to still occur even after barriers have been put in place. Yes, it's still possible. So the Swiss cheese just looked at some cheese. You know what cheese is like? For those of us that don't know cheese, look at agege bread, and cut it into slices. You discover that there will still be some holes in between or inside each of the slices. Now, those holes don't align per se. So imagine if you stand different slices of agege bread that has been cut into slices, you put them one after the other, you know, just one in front, another one next, the next one behind, just behind each other like that, and you have about 5 or 4 slices. If you send a beam of light from the front of the first slice, you discover that some of it will pass through some of the holes in that bread, that slice of bread. Okay, so that's a cheese. We're using a cheese. A cheese is just about when you slice a cheese, the kind of effect you have, the holes that you have in them is also like the holes you have when you slice agege bread. So though it's funny, but I'm just using that as an example. I'm trying to make a point here. Now, what's that point? Even despite your proactive steps, this is what happens. If you send a beam of light from the first slice, from the front of the first light, you discover that what now? Some of it will pass through some part of the hole on the first light. All right. Now, some other parts will be prevented. Some other part of the beam of light will be prevented from passing through. Now, the part that has passed through, the one of some of it will still pass through the next, but it may be little compared to what has passed through the first. And by the time you are getting to about the fifth slide, you discover that what now? It is very, very minute form of light, if there will be any, that would be getting to that fifth slide or coming out at the end of the fifth slide. All right. So what does this tell us? What it says is that it's irrespective of your proactiveness or your proactive monitoring systems in place, the barriers, the mitigating measures or control measures that are put in place, you may still have a tendency for an accident to occur, but the impact will be very little compared to when no barriers or mitigations or control measures are put at all. I think we understand that. All right. So proactive monitoring talks about what now? Safety inspection, where we have to identify the hazards and implement necessary controls. Then we talk about the safety tours. The safety tours also, in such cases, you see members of the senior management, they go around on inspection of the workplace. This happens usually in well-structured organizations where the management is also safety conscious. So once in a while, the senior management, might be the MD, CEO, come around and carry out an inspection, like a safety tour, to check, to be sure that everything is put in place as it's supposed to be. It's usually guided or followed by the safety manager or the head of the safety department, and he will check on every process, every system, and see things for himself. That's also a sign of management's commitment to safety as regards safety at work. All right. Then we'll talk about the safety as the safety survey. Now, this is the assessment of a particular area of health and safety. Now, it's in form of a tour too, but normally it's carried out by specialists. Okay, who will they will focus on specific topic or specific area, to check out for the strengths or weaknesses. For instance, you can have something like a noise assessment survey. All right, you can have something like a noise assessment survey. Yes. Then another one that we have is what I want to talk about the I mentioned something on the safety sampling. All right, the safety sampling, what that does is just to evaluate a limited number of items. Okay, you take a limited number of items and randomly you just do like a random sample exercise. Now we said something here. We said it's a random sampling exercise in which what now observers follow a predetermined rule or route, usually at normal working pace, and note any omission or non-compliance. It's less time consuming usually. Yes, it's less time consuming. So what happens there is that you just evaluate what now? A limited number of what now? Items. Okay. And then we have the what now? We have the safety audit. In the safety audit, what happens there? We evaluate the organization's health and safety management system. That's basically it. The compliance to the health and safety management system. That's what happens in what now? Safety auditing. All right. And I've talked about the surveillance. We said the surveillance periodically or pre-employment medical screenings, sometimes could be carried out, to identify if there are health problems and all that. So all the, for some organizations, for instance, whenever they are having a new employee, they ensure that this is done. Sometimes even in some areas, some fields, you have every periodically, like maybe every new week, at the beginning of every week, or by every other day, that's every 2 days, they carry out health check randomly. Sometimes it could be systematic, on the staff. Why? Because some of them may be hiding one or two health issues and you don't get to know about it, and it could cause an issue, a bigger problem later on. I've been in the field somewhere and we're on site, and some a particular man had kind of negotiated with the medical personnel that conducted the pre-mobilization medical check on all of us. For his own case, he lobbied the guy, kind of, bribed his way through so that they would hide his health issue. Yeah, it was hypertensive, seriously hypertensive. His blood pressure was very high, but they gave a doctored report, a false report, and he was able to pass through to go to the site, and they were carrying out a health surveillance. I would say fortunately for him, it was detected by the personnel on the site. and immediately the next available chopper was made available for the guy to be taken out of the facility. It wasn't long after he had been taken out of the facility that he had a crisis. In fact, the next day he had a crisis while he was already out, he had been sent back to base. He had a crisis. So imagine if that had happened in the site, or on site rather, that would have been a big problem, right? So that's why I still say fortunately for him, though he was taken off the project, but it was important that his health was preserved. Okay, so um, before I go any further, there are some things I still want to talk about, like the inspection in itself. Hmm? We have, okay, for reactive monitoring, let me quickly mention something about reactive monitoring. Reactive monitoring involves evaluation and um, evaluation of accidents, for instance, accident data. One, you can take this down, you can just jot it down. Number one is what? Evaluation of accident data. Then you also have workers complaint records. Those ones are reactive monitoring until they've complained before you now put their record in place. Like what is happening with the NSAS movement. The reaction, the response that the government is giving right now is more of what now? A reactive monitoring system. All those inspectors would have been addressed. They would have attended to them all the while. You didn't have to wait. And when I mean attended to them, they would have queried them or investigated the report. You don't have to wait until people are protesting before you now begin to take action. It does not show any form of proactiveness. What it shows is more of a reactive system of government. That you have to wait for people to complain. You have to wait for the situation to get bad or worsen. You have to wait for protests to be done before you now know that you take actions. Meanwhile, you've been seeing these problems. You've been hearing about the complaints in little forms, but never paid attention to it. That's a reactive system of government. So if you translate that now into health and safety, you can understand what we're talking about here. Okay, so you also look at what now? Enforcement actions. Enforcement actions is also another form of what now? Reactive action or reactive system. Then we also have ill health records and equipment breakdown records. Yeah, all these are examples of reactive monitoring. All right. Yes, these are examples of reactive monitoring. So we look at what the performance standards, conformance and non-conformance with standards. Yeah, the number and quality of risk assessment, the health and safety training schedules, con, consultative committee meetings to schedule, workplace inspection. Also, all these are highlights of what now? Our performance standard. And then we look at a systemic inspection. Okay. Now, when we're talking about inspection, inspection is the key feature of inspection is two key features is one, to identify hazards, and two, to implement controls. So take note of that. The key features of inspection is to identify hazards and what now? To also um, implement what? Control. Some of the things I may be saying, you may not be seeing them on the slide. As I'm talking with the slides or using the slides, I'll be mentioning one or two other things. So please do well to take note of whatever I may be saying. All right. Now, in inspection generally, we have we have some types of inspection. We have the general inspection, we have the routine inspection, and we also have a statutory inspection, inspection like the ones that has got to do with the requirement by law, you know, or manufacturer's requirement, Then you have the preventive maintenance inspection. That one is the type that you do to reduce the risk of breakdown, preventive maintenance inspection. And then we have the pre-use or pre-operational inspection, the kind of inspection you carry out before an equipment is put into use. We call that um, pre-use or pre-operational inspection. All right. So we have the general inspection, routine inspection, statutory inspection, preventive maintenance inspection, and pre-use or pre-operational inspection. And then when we talk about systemic inspections, for instance, we're looking at what now? Observations for plants or premises. You look at the machinery, the vehicles, the workplace, the environment. Then we talk about interviewing for people, when you want to check for their behaviors or working methods. And we look at examinations for procedures, when we have to talk about safe systems or method statements or permits to work. Okay, please ensure you read up on permits to work and permitting system. It's very important. What's a permit to work? What are the features of the permit to work? What are the functions of the permit to work? It's very important. Please ensure you take out time to study that also. Okay, now other proactive monitoring methods. We said we have the health surveillance, which involves monitoring workers' health as a proactive measure. It also shows effectiveness of control, then for benchmarking and the rest of it. All right, so we look at the next examples of inspection system. We have the bank head office. I hope you can all hear me clearly. So as I was saying, we look at what now? An example of inspection system. Now, if you're looking at an example of inspection system, look at maybe like a bank head office. The purpose to monitor the health and safety standards. Now, frequency, it can be done monthly. The persons responsible, the managers at different levels. Then competence, you look at what? 1 day course, kind of you prepare a 1 day course for those people to be able to work now, understand what is going to be expected and what is going to be done. All right, then you have an inspection checklist, very important. Now, this general list is usually tailored as required for different fields. So what you want to check, what you might use for a banking system if you are carrying out health and safety inspection may not be the same you use for a factory, maybe for a chemical producing factory, for instance. Okay, so then follow-up arrangements to the action plans to follow up. So those are very key. All right. So I have already talked about the types of what inspection. The types of inspection where I said we have the routine inspection, we have the general inspection, we have the periodic inspection, then you have the preventive and you have the pre-use checks, the pre-use or pre-operational inspection. I've explained that already. Okay. And then we look at the workplace inspection. When we look at the workplace inspection, we look at factors to consider. Now, when we're talking about the factors to consider in a workplace inspection, number one is the type of inspection that is necessary. Like what I was saying, the kind of inspection you carry out for a banking system may not be the same kind of inspection you carry out for a food producing or processing company or factory, or even for a chemical producing factory. Will be different. Okay, so We look at, or there will be some differences rather, let me put it that way. So we also look at the frequency of the inspection. How often, or what's the regularity, you know, of that inspection. Okay, so those are some of the factors that we will now consider. You look at it, it's okay, what are the requirements? What are the requirements for the inspection for the workers and for the method? What kind of inspection is required? Then the competency level of the inspector. So that's another factor that you must consider. And then we also look at when will the inspection be done. That's the timing. Okay, that's the period for the inspection. We also look at the objective of the inspection. What do we plan to achieve? Okay, now is a checklist required? We also need to find out. Okay, these are factors that must be considered when checking and when preparing for or planning an inspection. Another one is to also check for who will prepare the report. Very important. Who will prepare the report? Who will take the action on the recommendation? You know, and what are the weakest areas too? What's required by law as far as that inspection is what consider concerned. So these are factors that must be considered in carrying out what an inspection. I'll also talk about the factors that determine the frequency of an inspection. But before then, I would like to talk about the merits of an inspection. Some of the advantages of the inspection is that the health and safety inspection is a good opportunity to identify workplace hazards. It helps you to identify what now? Workplace hazards. Now, it also gives what now? It guides you in terms of what? Pre-planned actions, you know, and it also ensures that nothing is left out. You don't leave any stone unturned. Every area that needs to be checked is checked, you know. It helps to identify the workplace, the worker's behavior also. It gives an opportunity, added to that is that it gives an opportunity for you to assess the condition of things, you know, and it helps you to also possibly identify any area of deterioration, any area that things are not going properly or things are failing. You also are able to identify that through what now? Inspection. Now, but we also need to look at the limitations of or the disadvantages. You might see it in your question as a disadvantage or limitation of what now? Of inspection. Now, one of the limitations is that it does not identify hazards that are not perceptible or obvious. That's some kind of hazards may not be very obvious. You cannot determine that. You may not be able to assess that through inspections, okay, or through checklists, you know. Then another thing is that it may not identify the unsafe procedures if they are not if they are not ongoing, if they are not ongoing during the inspection, if you don't see the unsafe, you might not be able to identify the unsafe procedure. This is what I mean. Imagine if you were to carry out an inspection on maybe a water producing factory. Okay. If for instance you don't see where if the process of maybe especially for this sachet water, the one we call pure water, all right, if you don't inspect it while the work is being done, while they are sealing, see how the process, you might just only inspect the facility. And that's what happens typically when NAFDAC goes to inspect some of these places. They just inspect their facilities, inspect what they have and all that stuff. But we discover that some of them, the procedures are not really inspected. So in the process, what happens? You might even see that while sealing, someone might drop some other form of could possibly drop some other form of substance, some other substances into such liquids. and it will be sealed and sold out. Who monitors that? Because it's a failed system or a poor inspection, procedural inspection that must have been carried out that did not inspect their process for sealing such what now, um, or for packaging such product, which is the water, which is drinkable, and that could cause health issues for people who consume such products. Okay, so we look at what now? Another disadvantage is that it relies on the competence of the inspector. It is fully dependent on the what competence of the inspector. So if the inspector is not competent enough, you're not sure of getting a thorough inspection carried out. Now, inadequate checklist can also affect the result of the inspection. All right. If you use an inadequate checklist, a checklist that is not detailed enough, that does not cover many, at least as much area as necessary, then it could what now also affect the result of your inspection. And then we look at um, the factors that determine the frequency of what now an inspection. What are the factors that we have to look at or consider when looking at what now the frequency of an inspection? The frequency of an inspection. What are the factors that we have to look at? One of them is that we look at the nature of the workplace or the workforce. It's very important. The nature of the workplace or the workforce is very important. And you also look at the nature of the activity or equipment and the risk level also. Yes. What kind of then the type of workers is also important to look at that. Manufacturer's recommendation. Yes. What's the manufacturer saying about it? Then the environmental condition too. It's important to also look at that. And then we also look at the findings from previous inspections. You know, we look at the findings from previous inspection. What were the things that were discovered? What were the faults? What were the areas? What recommendations have been made from enforcement agencies or even from previous inspections? Recommendations, recommendations, enforcement actions that were taken also. What were the areas? So these things will determine what now the inspection, as well as even workers' complaints and what suggestions. Very important that we look at these factors. Okay. Um. So when we look at the okay, before I talk about this, let me talk about the purpose of investigation. Why do we have to carry out investigation? What's the purpose? To what end must this be done? Okay, we look at it from different areas. Number one, um, it's to determine the immediate and root cause of an incident. You can take that down, please. You can take that down. Just crossed my mind, so I have to quickly mention this. That this incident investigation, one of the purpose is for determining the immediate and root cause. We usually have two types of causes. We have the immediate cause and we have the root cause of an accident. Okay, we'll talk about that shortly. Then we have what now? Also to identify the weakness of our um, health and safety system. Then when we do that, it will help us to prevent a recurrence or future occurrence of such incidents. And then also another purpose for investigation is to fulfill the necessary legal requirements and also to identify in the occurrence. Is very, very what important that we note all this. Okay. So the workplace aspects that you look at in conducting inspection, the fire safety, housekeeping, how well the place are the environment is and all that. Then look at other environmental issues. Also look at traffic route. Traffic route, very important that you look at that too. And chemical safety, machinery safety, electrical safety, and welfare facilities. These are some of the critical areas that must be considered when we are carrying out an inspection. Okay. And so you look at what now the effect for such effective report writing, you need to consider the style, you know, the style. It must be a formal way of doing that and free of jargons or slangs. When you're writing an investigation or inspection report, you don't have to start making use of slangs, and it must be um, factual, persuasive, clear and concise. Use simple and understandable words or terms and the right register or vocabulary. Okay. Then the structure, it should have what? An executive summary, an introduction, a main body, and recommendations, then conclusion. That's the structure. Then the content, significant findings, evidence of the findings too. So what you discovered or what was, and evidences, some of them could be pictures or most times pictures, you know, and they have a justified recommendation. Now, they must align with the legal, the economic, and um the moral requirement, or argument. Then you also have what now? An action plan. All right. So this is a table that shows the format of such. Very important that we take note of this. Okay. And then there's something I quickly also want to mention, which is before I talk about all this, we look at the procedures for investigation. You can take note of that somewhere. The procedures for investigation. The procedures for investigation. Now, when we talk about the procedures for investigation, what we are looking at is in four areas. Number one, gathering of information. Two is to analyze the information. Three is to identify recommendation or identify what's it called now? The remedial action. Yeah, the remedial actions. And three is to draw up a plan. Okay. I'm sorry, four rather, to draw up a plan. So for that gathering of information, what we mean is, one, you have to visit the scene of the incident. After visiting the scene of the incident, then you analyze the information. You also identify recommendations, then you drop a plan. But in gathering information, you visit the scene of the incident, then you identify and interview witnesses. You understand? You identify the witnesses. Then you also take sample of materials and documents where necessary. And then you take pictures, video evidences, you know, measurements, sketches, plans. If you've seen where some of us may have seen this in some movies, if you've not seen it in real life, okay, you take pictures and evidences. I'll still go back again to the protest, like the one that was happening in Lekki, for instance, the Lekki toll. The military or the army came out to initially try to deny that there was any shooting and all that stuff. But there were already pictures and videos as evidences, even if they didn't give the security camera report, you know, it hasn't been made public. But witnesses, people around already had some of those videos and clips. So imagine if nothing of such was available, we would have just believed that indeed there was no shooting, there was no killing, there was no, like what the governor of Lagos was even claiming, that only one person died. Meanwhile, we've had videos and pictures of so many of them, of these incidents, so many casualties of that incident. Okay, so in analyzing an incident, you look at two things: the immediate cause and the root cause. Okay, the immediate cause and the root cause. And you have to ensure that it involves what now? Technical experts. All right. Then in identifying the recommendation or identifying the remedial action, we look at what can be done to prevent future occurrences. What measures should we put in place so that this thing will not occur again? You now look at all those things. Then you drop a plan, maybe in the tabular form, and you'll be able to work now. Follow through to prevent future occurrences. Then we talk about the benchmarking. Okay, let me just quickly mention that. In benchmarking, we say it is also useful as a management tool, and it takes key perform what called KPI, the key performance, compares them externally with similar organizations or industrial standards, or internally with other business units on site. So you can benchmark sometimes. You know, in benchmarking, we I know I skipped that earlier. In benchmarking, we just try to look at a comparison with other standards, okay, and see how what we have meets up to those standards, especially the clearly defined standards, or industrial standards. Now, in this process, organizations learn more about their strengths and their weaknesses. And by so doing, what happens? You can now act on the lessons that you have learned and be able to bring yourself up to what standard, or improve on your standard. So we have different advantages of the benchmarking. It helps to ensure monitoring. Um, the monitoring procedures are effective. It also helps to identify the key performance indicators. Okay, very important. It helps to identify the key performance indicators and avoids what now? Mistakes by learning lessons from others, so you don't make mistakes. Then the gains, you gain the confidence of your stakeholder when you have proper benchmarking in place. Now, you also have what now? The disadvantages. Now, in the disadvantages, number one is that, or one of it is that assuring accuracy of the data is very, it's not always sure. You're not always sure. Accuracy of the data. Then choosing a company benchmark against the ones that have similar activities, but it's not a close competitor. You know, sometimes how do you guarantee that the company that you are using their own standard as a benchmark are even standard enough per se? Okay, most times most contractors or subcontractors fall prey to this one because when they want to embark on a task or on a project or on a job, they want to see that they bring up their standards to be like the standard of maybe their client or um, other existing clients of the mother company that they want to have a project with. So you see somebody wants to do a job with uh, ABC ABC Energy Services, and he we have XYZ as a client to ABC. Then you now try to bring your standard up to XYZ. Meanwhile, XYZ may not, apart from them being in a different field from yours, they may also have their own flaws. So you try to be an imitation of something that is not yet very standard. You can only be the fake of it, something of that nature. That's what it means. All right. So those are some of the disadvantages of um, benchmarking. Okay. So quickly, I would just want to highlight something here. The steps, before I talk about this, the steps to be taken before before investigation, as in when an accident occurs, what are the steps that you should take? There are just some basic steps. Number one is for you to secure the scene. If, for instance, there is an accident, you secure the scene first. Ensure that nothing is taken out or taken in, no strange thing is brought in, you know, so you don't compromise the information that you are going to gather there. Okay, that's why you see that most times when an accident occurs somewhere, they'll cordon off the area by using maybe barricades or caution tapes and all that to limit access to such area. Okay, so you attend to the victims and the casualties, and then you report to the appropriate authorities. You know, sometimes it can also be the next of kin of such victim. It's very important. Okay, so how do we before? Okay, I'll go to another point. How we conduct interviews effectively, and then highlight report writing or give us assignments on report writing so that we can go into the last part of this session. Okay, now discussion point. Take note of discussion point and please give it a try for yourself. Use it to decide. An organization has two sites carrying out similar operations. Site A has 300 workers and has 10 accidents. Site B has 150 workers and has 5 accidents. Now the question is, which of the sites has a better safety performance? So how do we measure safety performance? I'll just give you a clue there, heads up there. Is by what now? Looking at the accident, workers to accident ratio, something of that nature. That will help you get the frequency. So we look at this other side here, the accident rate. Incident rate, which is AIR. We talk about the accidents per 1,000 workers. Okay, and you calculate it by taking what the number of accidents during a specific period divided by the average number of workers during the same period and multiply that answer by 1000. So that's what gives you the accident rate. Anyone that has a large value, it means that the accident rate is high, and in such case, the safety performance is low. If your accident rate is high, your safety performance is low. Then if you have a low value, it means that your accident rate is low and your safety performance is high. That's what it means. Okay. All right. So please ensure you take out time to read up some other areas. Look at this discussion point. To practice using open. Okay, sorry. 1 minute. Let me. Okay. No, 30 years. Yes, very important. Um. Okay. Okay. Good. Now we look at document examination. Document examination. When we talk about um document examination, we're looking at the what now? The company health and safety policy, the documents that you examine if you have to deal with site plans, during inspection. You look at what now? The company and their health and safety policies, the risk assessments, induction records, their toolbox records, the minutes of their meetings, the training records too, the record that shows trainings that their workers have been taken through, and it will show the date, the type of training, the personnel that trained them, the workers that were trained in those areas. That's very key. Then we also look at the safe system of work and also the permit to work. The permit to work, that document that authorizes any individual to carry out a job after meeting with the necessary safety recommendations for such tasks to be carried out. And then you also look at what now? The maintenance records, then previous accident record. So we also look at what now? The previous accident record or report, and sickness records. These are areas that we look out for when carrying out document examination. Okay. Then when you're analyzing information, which is the next step, you look at the immediate cause. Two of them: unsafe acts, the actions that were taken or activities that were done unsafely, or the acts that were done without following necessary safety um, regulations or guidelines for carrying out such tasks, and unsafe conditions also. Then you look at the what underlying or root causes, the reasons behind the immediate cause, and then when we talk about root cause and immediate cause, we're looking at when we are analyzing an incident or an accident. Okay, this is where the bow tie analysis comes in. Here you look at, okay, what could have caused it, how did it happen, what was involved, from you are tracing it to the basic, the main cause, gongon. Let me use that slang. The main cause of that what now accident is the root cause. Now the immediate cause is the one that is just what at the surface. Look at this, for instance. Let's say you have an accident on the road. Now someone is driving and a woman is hit. Now the immediate cause of the accident is the car that has hit the woman while the person, on the road. Okay, but when you when you carry out a root cause analysis, you might eventually discover from a root cause analysis that, look at this, the vehicle that day, maybe before the person left or the driver left, for a long time he had not carried out maintenance on that vehicle, and the brakes were already having issue. There was no brake test done or maintenance done on the brakes. Okay, and then the driver, in the course of driving, loses um, control because of his brakes that fails, and goes to collide with another person when he would have been able to hold back his brake. Now, the root cause is the failed braking system of the car, but the cause of the accident is may not the immediate cause is that there was what now, the woman was crossing the road and she was hit by the car, something of that nature. That is an immediate cause. You understand? That she was crossing the road, a busy road, maybe straight to take the bridge. But the root cause is that the braking system of that vehicle was faulty already. Okay, so those are underlying or root causes of incident. All right, so very important we understand this. These are just some examples of what we're talking about. Okay, so uh, the lessons that we've learned. Action taken as a result of an incident, now published internally as lessons learned. It's very important that we take the lessons after we've taken the actions or put actions in place. Whatever lessons that there are, we take them down as lessons learned. It shows the company's commitment to improving in their area of, excuse me, health and safety management. Okay, and then it also allows what now, improvements to be made. All right, so there are some questions here. Why might an employee not report an incident? What could be reasons why employees don't report, and an employee will not want to report an incident? There are so many reasons for that. What are the typical content of an internal incident report, and why is an incident data collected? Very important that we go through. You try these questions. Also, take a snapshot of this. Take a snapshot of this. All right. Please ensure you give it a try. Yes. And then take a snapshot of this. Or take a snapshot of this assignment. Take a snapshot of this assignment. Yes. And this part too. For further study, try and read up this part. Please ensure you take a snapshot of all this quickly. Quickly, please take a snapshot. Take a snapshot of this and of this too also. So you and we will hopefully be able to on these areas. Thank you very much for your time. Please ensure